Hello, welcome to the third episode in this Spring and Kotlin series. Again, we will now be extending the functionality and making an actual application, building in some logic and adding the things we learned from the first two and binding them together. So we're going to be using models. We're going to be using get request with parameters, and post request for the first time in here. So again, a small exercise called The Office with pun intended references. The application will be used to manage a selection of employees in the office. So with that said, let's get started and create our first folders in here called a package for our models. The next part, we can also create the folder for controllers, which we will be using in a second. So our first model, we are going to be controlling employees. So I'm going to create an employee class. That class has an ID. It has a full name, an email, and a position. So just give me a second to type everything out. So now we have our basic class with an employee. We can add a function to demonstrate that everything works, and we will override the toString function. So for those who don't know, a toString function is always available in a Java class, or in this case also a Kotlin class, and we will write the toString function. Now, I say override because the moment I start to developing the function, it will say that it already exists. So it hides the member of any of supertype any and needs the override modifier. Well, if IntelliJ says so, we do it like this. ToString will need a return type string, of course, because we will return some sort of string representation of what the employee is or is supposed to be. So in this case, return. Give me a second to type everything out. You can do this to your liking as well. Okay, perfect. So now that we have our employee with those details, we can build our controller. And you know what? It's not really part of the exercise, but let's just create a new employee and pass it along with a dummy endpoint to test if our function is actually working. So our controller is going to be called, of course, employee controller. We have our employee controller here, and we will annotate this as we did with the rest of the exercises. So we create a REST controller. To be clear, we will create our request mapping on employee. That means everything is routed through this URI, employee. And it will have all the endpoints. Now, we will have a couple of them, and we will dive into them in a second. But I want to test. You know what? Let's create a test route that will return an employee. Whoops. Employee. It automatically imports the employee from the office. Get mapping. Let's not build this on the actual index page, but actually create a new test. Return employee, and I think we needed an ID, which is 1. We needed a full name. Yes. Of course, Dwight Schrute. Our next part needed to be an email. Dwight Schrute at dundlermifflin.com. And the position is it's too long to type out, but is assistant to the regional manager. Voila. And normally this should be okay. We will get the object. Let's test that out for now, and then let's test our toString method after that. So again, we have our port on 8080 because we did not change it. If you do want so, feel free to do that. Employee is our index. Index should not exist. That's correct. But our test should exist. Let's see if it works. All right, we have Dwight Schrute. Perfect. Now, what if we return our toString method? .toString. Let's see what we get back now. And we get a string back. So this is how I build it. If we look back into the employee, actually we don't need spaces in here. These are all just strings. And this simple overridden function, my apologies, will give you back this textual representation. So again, this is how you want to return your data. If you want to do it in JSON format or string format, that is up to you. So now that we have our test, we can continue with the actual cool things, and that is having a hire employee action and an all action that actually returns all the employees. So the next action will be to return all employees. So fun all employees, and we will return a list of employees. List of employee objects. Perfect. We don't have anything yet. We don't have any persistence, nor will we in this video, but we will add something later called an office model that will hold the list. For now, we can change it later, but for now we will return a dummy list so that to check if it works. So return list of, and then create employees. So I have added 3 employees of the office with their unique details. And of course, to return that, we need a get mapping with, for example, all. Now, before we test this, because we know already that this will work, we will add a new functionality called a post mapping. So fun, hire employee. If we hire a new employee, then we need to create a post mapping. So our data is sent to us in a more secure way than is with a GET request. That's first of all, and there is more possible. So again, a post mapping, same functionality as GET mapping, but we will do something extra to get the data out of the body. So hire, it's a hire. In that, we will be adding an employee. Now, the cool thing about Spring is, of course, that it uses dependency injection. That means that whenever we need an object of a certain type, for example, we need an employee here. Let's call employee. This object will be created based on the data that is passed along in the post request. It will automatically be filled up. That also means that if I pass along data that does not conform with the employee object, then it will give a bad request error, because an employee has, let's review, an ID, a full name, an email, and a position. So if that data is not in the post mapping, this will crash. Now, how do we get that out of there? We get that from the request, and post data is, of course, located in the body. So request body, emp employee. Again, note that all the imports are done for me. If you don't want to do that, or you think you're going to screw up by not auto-completing with the imports, just put star in here, and that should be enough. Again, we need to return our employee. We don't have somewhere to save it yet to hire it, but we will return that employee to string function with some other things. So in this case, we will return a string. Return you are hired. And what will we add? We will add emp.toString. Now it will look a bit funky, so I think it will probably be converted to string concatenation again. If we add the variable as an object in string iteration, it will automatically use a toString function. So this is even easier. I just wanted to see where we came from. We will restart our server and test everything. So the first thing I'm going to test is the all function. So all, and we have Dwight Schrute, Jim Halpert, and Creed Brad. If we want to do the hire function, we will get an error, because there is no get method of a hire. It is a post method. So in Postman, we will conform to post, and try again. So it says it's a bad request. A bad request means that, of course, the data you sent through cannot be injected here into the request body of the employee. So we need to actually fill up the body. So we will add a body here. In our case, we will use JSON. And you know what? To easily test, we can get everyone. Again, copy paste one object in our body. Let's do Dwight Schrute again. Again, there is no connection. There is no connection between those two methods. This doesn't matter what we insert in here. And we will do a hire with the data and a post request. And let's see what we get back. You are hired. One, Dwight Schrute, DS Mifflin, Dunder Mifflin, and the assistant to the regional manager, of course. So that works. We have our post mapping, we have our gap mapping, and we have everything we need to continue to the next part of this video. And that means building the actual office and some persistence, albeit hacked together. All right, time to create our new model. We will create an office model that will hold our list of employees. So office, it's a class, that's correct, but we will be building a singleton. Now, a singleton it has some more work in Java than in Kotlin. In Kotlin, a singleton means that we need to use the keyword object because there is only one instance of this class in the whole application allowed. That's what makes it a singleton. So we need to use the term object. I can select it here, or if I create a class, I can just change this to object. It's still the same. Again, has a different color here. So now we have a singleton class. What does this class need? It needs a lot of things. One of the things is it needs a list of employees. It needs a hire function. It needs a fire function. And get all function. Why the get all? Because of course some properties in a singleton are private. That is the whole point of it, so that you should not be able to access that straight from that object. I'm more specifically thinking about data access objects and database layers. But again, this is probably something from my applied informatics days. We will need a list of employees. So let's create a var employees, and that is a mutable set of employees. Now a mutable list, mutable set, because we only can hire the same person once, of employee objects. And we will create mutable set of an empty one so we can declare it. Now we want to make this private, just so we have clear functions to work with. Let's start with the hire function, because we already have our post method, and it would be cool if we actually could hire someone into this list of people. Now, the hire function, fun, hire employee. What do we pass along? Well, we pass along an employee. And what do we need, or what do we do? We hire the employee. So we have a mutable set of employees dot add, and we add the emp. Again, there's no validation here. We just want to add the employee. It will give us an error, of course, if the same employee is added twice, but we won't worry for that for now in our use case. So the employee is added. We can also build the get all function, which we can use to check if our employee is added. Voila, we added the function get all employees. We added a hire employee. Now it's time to wire up our controller to make use of these functions. And let's see if our singleton does what it needs to do. So we are here in our controller, and we will rework this hire function to actually use the emp object to hire it into the office. So that means that I need to be able to access the office. So instead of just importing employee, I'm going to import all my models. So that means I also have access to the office. Office dot hire employee. Again, the hire employee will not return a string, and that's probably what it's what the issue is here. So I removed the explicitly typing. We can fix this later in cleanup, but for now we just want to hire an employee, and this we will keep our dummy data, and we will return office.getAllEmployees. And it will say it needs a mutable list, of course. And now we can actually test if everything works. We hire an employee here, we get all the employees here. Let's see in Postman what the result is. All right, first of all, we start with the all function. The all function, of course, has an empty array, and we will do a post request to hire with Dwight Schrute, and it doesn't give us anything back. We will fix that later on, but for now, nothing happened, no error. So let's see if it worked. Let's do a get again and get all employees. And we see that Dwight Schrute has successfully been added to the office. That also means that if I restart my server, that data is gone because it only lives in the memory of the application. So with that out of the way, let's try and add some more functionality to the application and finish it up. All right, we are back in our office class. We will update some more functions. So the first of them is the hire employee. We will return true or false if this actually works. So employees.add returns a boolean. We will change this to a boolean, and we in our controller we will handle if the person has been successfully hired. So we will return a string for now, and we will use our new toString function. So if office hire employee is true, else we can say return the person could not be hired. So we've changed this, and now at least our test should be a little bit more conclusive when we try it out. So again, our all should be empty. If we hire with a post request, the following person has been hired, and we use our toString function, perfect. And if we use all, method not allowed because it's a get, and it works. So again, empty array. We have updated the post mapping. The last thing we're going to do is, of course, a fire option. So fire function is a function to fire an employee. Just going to copy paste this because it's the same structure. And our fire employee will need to do a bit of control. Now, we won't pass along the whole employee object. An ID is enough. So an int. And we can, let's see what kind of functions we have. We are working with a set. So if I'm not mistaken, we can do employees.remove, and we can do a filter. So remove if, and then use a lambda, I think. On the iterator, the ID, if it's equal to our ID. And this should remove the object from the set if it exists. This returns a boolean, so we return the boolean itself. We have a fire employee function, and that means in our controller we can have a fire route. Fire. We do a get mapping. fire. We pass along the ID. And instead of the request body, we will use a path variable. Again, all the knowledge from the previous one comes back. ID of type int. And if fire employee returns true, fire employee ID has been fired. The person with ID has been fired. And then we can just copy paste this. Has not been fired if something went wrong. So we have updated our hire. We have added a new fire method. Let's test everything out. All right, we will start by hiring some people. So again, I will hire Dwight Schrute with ID 1. Let's do it again for ID 2 and ID 3. So now if we go to, if we go to our all function, we have 3 IDs. So 1, 2, and 3. If I want to delete the second one, I should be able to use fire and get request. So this doesn't matter. The body is not passed along. I want to delete number 2. The person with ID has been fired. Now we can try again. The person with ID 2 has not been fired because it's probably he or she is probably already gone. So if we go to all, we should only see 1 and 3. So we have full hire and fire functionality in our application. All right, this video has been going long enough, so we have a good, clear understanding, I hope, of how these posts and get mappings work with request data that you can pass along with multiple objects, even a singleton clause that uses some sort of persistence. Now, there is a bonus assignment. I will handle it in the next video. For now, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next video.